4 days after we buried Frank, I sat in his office chair at the shop, the one with the cracked leather and the grease stain on the left armrest that never came out, and I transferred every dollar he had ever saved, all 1.6 million of it, into a trust with my name on it and walls around it that no Kowalski man alive could climb. I did it because I had heard what they were already planning. Welcome to the channel. Last spring, middle of April, about a year ago now, I was driving home from a dentist appointment in Superior, taking the back way down Hammond Avenue because the bridge traffic on a Tuesday makes me want to drive into the lake, and I saw a U-Haul parked outside a brown duplex on Ogden Avenue. Not a big one. The medium size, the kind with the painting of a mountain on the side that is trying very hard to make you feel like moving, is an adventure. It is not an adventure. It is cardboard boxes and back pain. Donnie Kowalski, my husband's first cousin, 55 years old, twice divorced and currently working on making it a clean 3, was standing at the back of that truck trying to shove a floor lamp through the door at an angle that the lamp was not going to survive. His truck was gone. Sold, I would later find out, to cover the first 2 months of rent. And helping him carry a garbage bag full of what looked like every extension cord the man had ever owned was a tall young man, 24 years old, with my husband's exact shoulders and my husband's exact way of tilting his head when he was trying to figure out something mechanical. That was my son. I did not stop. I did not honk. I did not slow down. I drove right past that duplex on Ogden Avenue in my 2019 Subaru Outback with the University of Minnesota, Duluth decal that Ethan stuck on the back window during his freshman year, and I went home. I made myself a fried egg sandwich on wheat bread with yellow mustard, the way my mother used to make them every Saturday when I was a girl in Proctor. And I sat at my kitchen table with the window cracked open just enough to let in the smell of Lake Superior in April, which is a smell that is equal parts thawing earth and cold iron, and I ate that sandwich alone. Now, to understand how my husband's cousin and my own son ended up moving into a rental duplex in Superior, Wisconsin together, sharing a bathroom and a hot plate and what I can only assume is a deeply uncomfortable silence, and how I ended up watching it happen from the front seat of my car with mustard on my thumb, I need to take you back about 4 months. To the week I buried my husband. So grab a coffee. Or a glass of wine. I am not your mother. Frank Kowalski died on a Tuesday morning, January 7th. 7 o'clock in the morning, 14 degrees below zero with the wind chill, and Frank was underneath a Chevy Silverado on the lift at the shop, changing a set of winter tires for Gary Peltonen, who has been bringing his trucks to Kowalski and Sons Auto since 2008. Frank's heart decided, right there on that cold concrete floor, with the compressor running and the space heater pointed at his feet the way he always set it up, that it was done. 53 years old. No warning. No symptoms, no dramatic clutching of the chest, like in the movies. Gary found him on the floor next to the lift, with a lug wrench still in his right hand and his thermos of coffee sitting on the workbench 3 feet away, still warm. The paramedics said it was massive. They said he would not have felt much. I do not know if that is true or if that is what paramedics say to wives who are standing in their kitchens at 7:45 in the morning in a bathrobe, holding a phone, trying to understand a sentence that does not make any sense. And that was the end of 23 years of marriage. I want you to understand something about Frank before we go any further because he is going to be in every room of this story, even though he is not in any of them. Frank Kowalski was not a complicated man. He woke up at 5:30 every morning, drove to the shop, worked until his hands hurt, came home, kissed me on the side of the head, ate whatever I put in front of him, and fell asleep in his recliner watching whatever game was on. He had been doing this since he opened that shop in 2004 with a used lift, 3 wrenches, and a stubbornness that the state of Minnesota has not seen since the Vikings decided to keep building football teams. He was not perfect. He left his boots by the door where I tripped on them at least twice a week for 23 years. He thought loading the dishwasher meant putting everything on the bottom rack and hoping for the best. He could not remember a single one of my friends' names except Patrice, and that was only because Patrice once brought over a plate of lefse so good that Frank talked about it for 3 Christmases. But he was mine, and I was his, and now he was gone, and everything he had ever built was sitting in bank accounts and property deeds and insurance policies with my name on them, and his cousin Donnie and my son Ethan were already circling like crows on a telephone wire. The funeral was Saturday, January 11th, Bethany Lutheran Church on 3rd Street in Lincoln Park. Open casket, because Frank's mother, Irene, insisted, even though Frank had told me more than once, usually after his 3rd beer at a family barbecue, that if he ever ended up in a box, he wanted the lid nailed shut and the whole thing put in the ground before anybody had time to comment on how they did his hair. He did not get the option. 180 people showed up. 14 hottish casseroles. 14. I counted. Also, a sheet cake from the super one on central entrance, 4 trays of those little triangle sandwiches with the crusts cut off, which is a food that I have never understood. We are in northern Minnesota. We eat food that can survive a blizzard. What is a crustless cucumber sandwich going to do for anybody in January? Who decided this was funeral food? Anyway, there were also 9 bars, 3 kinds of Jell-O salad, and a slow cooker full of Swedish meatballs that someone plugged into the outlet behind the coat rack and that I could smell from the front pew for the entire service. That is where this story really begins. At the funeral, at a table full of hottish, and in a coat room where I heard 2 voices say something I was never supposed to hear. Frank would have hated every second of it. He once told me, sitting on the back porch with a Laney's in his hand watching the sun go down behind the paper mill, that if more than 6 people showed up to his funeral, at least 4 of them were lying about how much they liked him. 180 people came. Either Frank was wrong about his popularity, or Lutherans in Duluth will show up to any event that has a hot dish table and a parking lot. I was standing near the coffee station in the fellowship hall, which is the room attached to every Lutheran church in Minnesota where the real business of life gets done. Births, deaths, confirmations, potlucks, passive-aggressive conversations about who signed up to bring what. I was holding a paper plate with a scoop of tater-tot hot dish I had no intention of eating and trying to remember how breathing worked when my best friend Patrice Johansson walked up holding 2 glasses of something that was definitely not the church punch. Patrice has been my best friend since 1997. Actually, hold on. I want to tell you how we met because it matters later and because it is one of my favorite stories. It was December 1997, the Duluth Christmas City of the North Parade downtown. I was 22 years old, freezing to death on Superior Street, watching the floats go by, and Patrice was standing next to me in a parka that was 3 sizes too big, eating a bag of kettle corn, and crying. Not sobbing. Just quiet tears running down her face and freezing on her cheeks. I asked her if she was okay. She said she had just broken up with her boyfriend an hour ago in the parking lot of the Duluth Athletic Club because he told her that her dream of opening a Scandinavian bakery was, and I am quoting, a dumb idea that nobody in their right mind would pay money for. She had driven downtown, parked, walked to the parade, and started eating kettle corn because she did not know what else to do. I said, Scandinavian bakery? Like lefse and krumkake? She said, and rosettes and sandbackles and cardamom bread? I said, that is the best idea I have ever heard in my life. That man is an idiot. Give me some of that kettle corn. That is how a 29-year friendship starts in northern Minnesota, standing on a frozen sidewalk sharing kettle corn while a high school marching band plays Jingle Bells slightly off-key. Patrice opened her bakery on Canal Park 6 years later. It is called Johansson's. It has been there ever since. The boyfriend, as far as I know, is still wrong. Anyway, Patrice handed me a glass and said, Linda Kowalski, you are going to drink this entire glass right now. If anyone asks, it's grape juice. It is not grape juice. She is not a doctor. She is not a therapist. She is a 5'10" Norwegian woman who makes the best crumb cake in the state of Minnesota and who has never in her life let me sit in my own misery for longer than 15 minutes. That is better than most doctors I have met. So, that was me, Linda Kowalski, 46 years old, school secretary at Denfeld High School for 17 years. Standing in a Lutheran fellowship hall at 11 in the morning, drinking Moscato out of a paper cup that said God's blessings on the side, wearing the only dark dress I owned that still fit, which was from a cousin's wedding in 2018 and pinched in places I would rather not discuss on the internet. I stood there and I looked around the room. I want to tell you what I saw because it matters. Over by the dessert table, helping herself to a third piece of sheet cake, was Frank's mother, Irene, who had not spoken to me directly in 3 years because of a disagreement about Thanksgiving seating arrangements that I do not have time to get into right now, but which involved a folding chair, a comment about my cranberry sauce, and a silence that has lasted longer than some marriages. Over by the window, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, was Donnie Kowalski, 55 years old, Frank's first cousin on his father's side. Donnie has the kind of face that always looks like it is about to sell you something. He is 6'1", thick in the middle, wears his hair slicked back even though there is not enough of it left to justify the effort, and walks into every room like he is the keynote speaker at an event nobody invited him to. He had been a mechanic at Frank's shop for 12 years. Frank had let him stay in the apartment above the garage rent-free since 2017 because Frank, at his core, was a soft touch when it came to family. Donnie was wearing a suit I had never seen before. It did not fit him well, but it fit him confidently, which is worse. Standing right next to Donnie, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, was Ethan, my son, 24 years old. He had come home from the Army 8 months earlier. 2 years in, honorable discharge, quiet about the details. He had been living in his old bedroom since May, working part-time at the shop, sleeping late, not saying much. He was wearing a white button-up that I had ironed for him that morning. He looked like his father. He always looked like his father. Samayev. Same shoulders, same way of standing with his weight on his left foot like he was always about ready to walk somewhere but had not decided where yet. And 3 chairs behind them, sitting alone with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes fixed on nothing in particular, was Megan Torres, Ethan's girlfriend, 22. Preschool teacher at the Little Stars Academy on Piedmont Avenue. Sweet girl. Drove a gray Honda Civic with a bumper sticker that said Teach Kindness and a yellow lab mix named Benson who once ate one of my couch cushions. She was watching Ethan and Donnie. She was watching them the way you watch 2 people when you know something about them that you wish you did not. I did not know that yet. I would. About an hour into the reception, I went looking for more napkins. The ones by the coffee had run out, and Frank's Aunt Doris had spilled meatball juice on her sleeve, which was a situation that required immediate attention because Doris is the kind of woman who will bring up a stain at every family gathering for the next 10 years. I cut through the back hallway toward the coat room, and that is where I heard them. The coat room at Bethany Lutheran is not really a room. It is a hallway with hooks on both sides and a bench underneath that has held 40 years of wet mittens and Lutheran guilt. It smells like damp wool and old hymnals. The overhead light flickers. Nobody has fixed it since I started going to this church in 2003, and I suspect nobody will fix it until the building itself returns to the earth. I was 3 steps into that hallway, holding a roll of paper towels with a cartoon bear on the packaging, when I heard Donnie's voice. Low. The way men talk when they think they are being smart and quiet at the same time, but are only achieving one of those things. Look, Ethan, your dad and I had an understanding about the shop. He always said if anything happened, the business stays in family blood. We need to sit down with your mom before she does something stupid with all that money. I stopped walking. I did not mean to stop. My feet just decided, independently of the rest of me, that they were not going anywhere until my ears were finished. Ethan's voice. Quieter. She's gonna freak out. Not if we do it right. Just let me handle her. I know how to talk to your mom. He does not know how to talk to me. He has never known how to talk to me. In 23 years, Donnie Kowalski has had exactly 2 modes of conversation with me. Mode 1 is compliments that feel like someone buttering a pan before they cook you. Mode 2 is explaining things to me that I already know in a voice that suggests he learned them recently and believes he invented them. There is no Mode 3. I have checked. I stood there in that hallway, with the paper towels in my hand, and the flickering light above my head, and the muffled sound of 180 people eating hot dish on the other side of the wall, and something inside me went quiet, not calm. Quiet the way Lake Superior gets right before a November storm, when the water goes flat and silver and the gulls disappear and you know something is coming that you cannot stop, but you can absolutely prepare for. I want to be very clear about what I did next. I did nothing. I turned around. I walked back into the fellowship hall. I handed the paper towels to Doris, who looked at the cartoon bear on the package and said, "These are for children. which is the most Doris thing she has ever said. I smiled. I refilled my paper cup of not grape juice. I stood by the coffee station for another hour. I accepted 14 hugs from people whose names I could not remember. I listened to Frank's Uncle Jerry tell a story about the time Frank fixed his snowblower with a coat hanger and a piece of duct tape, a story I had heard 9 times and which gets longer every telling. I shook hands. I nodded. I said thank you. I said I know. I said he was a good man. I did not march into that coat room and start a fight at my own husband's funeral. Kowalski women do not make scenes at receptions. We make phone calls, and I made mine the next night. The rest of Saturday, I survived on autopilot. People brought food. People left. Patrice stayed until 9, washed every dish in my kitchen, took out the trash, put leftovers in containers with masking tape labels in her handwriting, and hugged me at the front door so hard I heard my back crack. She told me to call her in the morning. She told me to eat something before bed. She told me that if anyone showed up at my house uninvited before noon the next day, she would handle it personally. And she said handle it in a voice that suggested the handling would not be gentle. I ate 3 bites of hot dish over the sink at 10:30 at night. I went to bed. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark on my side of the bed, which was the left side, the side I had slept on for 23 years, and I stared at the right side, which still had the dent in the pillow where Frank's head had been, and I listened to the house make the sounds that houses make in January in Minnesota when it is 15 below and the wood is contracting and the furnace is running and the world outside is so quiet that you can hear your own blood in your ears. Sunday, I moved through the house like a ghost in my own life. I drank coffee. I sat in Frank's recliner because it still smelled like him, a combination of motor oil, Irish Spring soap, and the spearmint gum he chewed after every meal because he read somewhere in 2012 that it was good for digestion. I do not know if that is true, but the man went through a pack of Wrigley's every 2 days for 13 years, so he was committed to the theory. Sunday evening at 7:15, I picked up my phone and called Diana Blackwood. Diana has been our estate attorney for 9 years. She is also, as it happens, a patient at the orthopedic clinic where my friend Nora works, because Diana has a left knee that she describes as, and this is a direct quote, an ongoing act of betrayal by my own skeleton. Diana is 60 years old. She has white hair cut short. She wears flat shoes every day of her life. She speaks so softly that opposing counsel has to lean forward to hear her, which is a trick she told me once that she learned in her first year of practice and has been using for 35 years since, because a man who is leaning forward is a man who is off balance. She answered on the second ring. I said one sentence. I said I needed to be in her office Monday morning at 9 o'clock, and I needed her to bring everything she had with Frank's name on it. There was a pause. Diana does not fill pauses. She lets them sit. Then she said, I will be there at 8:30. I will bring the files. And I will bring a cinnamon roll from that place on Superior Street. Because you sound like a woman who has not eaten properly in 4 days, and I am not going to let you make legal decisions on an empty stomach. That is why Diana Blackwood has been my attorney for 9 years. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, I was sitting in Diana Blackwood's office in a wingback chair that has been in that room since at least the first Bush administration, and possibly longer. The chair is dark green. It has a coffee stain on the left arm that Diana has never cleaned, because she once told me she believes furniture should look like it has lived a life. Her office is on the 4th floor of a building on Superior Street downtown that has a view of the harbor if you stand up and lean to the right. I did not stand up. I was not in a leaning mood. Diana had a cinnamon roll from the Nordic Bakehouse waiting on a napkin. She had a pot of coffee that was strong enough to file its own tax return. She had 2 accordion folders on her desk, each one thick enough to prop open a door. And she had her reading glasses on, the ones with the thin silver chain, which meant she had already been reading before I arrived. She slid the cinnamon roll across the desk toward me. Eat first, then we talk. I ate. It was still warm. It was the first thing I had tasted in 5 days that did not taste like cardboard and grief. There was cream cheese frosting, and it was good, and I will not apologize for caring about that during what was technically the worst week of my life. Then we went through everything. Frank's will, drafted and signed in this office in April of 2022, properly executed. properly witnessed by Diana's two paralegals, Sandra and Kathy, who have been with her for a combined 41 years, properly notarized. Sealed in Diana's filing cabinet since the day the ink dried. The will was clear, everything to me. The house on Lincoln Park, the shop, the cabin on Lake Superior near Two Harbors. The two vacant lots on Raleigh Street that Frank bought in 2019 because he had a feeling about the neighborhood. And he was right. The neighborhood is coming up like a weed in spring. The Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance policy. The 401k through Edward Jones, the joint brokerage account, the joint checking and savings. All of it. Every bolt, every board, every dollar. Mine. Diana took off her glasses. She let them hang on the chain. She looked at me over the desk, the way she looks at everything, with the steady gaze of a woman who has spent 35 years listening to people lie and has developed an allergy to wasted time. She said, "Lindy, everything is yours. Legally, clearly, unambiguously yours. Patrick's will is airtight. The beneficiary designations on the life insurance and the retirement accounts are in your name. The house and the cabin are joint tenancy with right of survivorship. The shop is solely in Frank's name with you as the designated successor. There is no crack in this wall." She paused. Diana pauses the way other people breathe. But that does not mean they will not come for it. And when they come, they will not come with the law on their side. They will come with noise. They will come with pressure. They will come with a story that sounds just reasonable enough to make a judge listen for 15 minutes before dismissing it. And those 15 minutes will cost you money, sleep, and peace of mind. She put her glasses back on. So here's what I recommend. We move everything into a spousal, irrevocable trust. Today, if possible. Tomorrow at the latest. It does not change your ownership. It does not limit your access. What it does is put a wall around your assets that is very, very difficult to climb. Even if someone files a challenge, the trust protects the assets during litigation. It is a fortress, Lindy, and I think you need a fortress right now. I said, "Do it." She said, "You are sure?" I said, "Diana, I have been married to a Kowalski man for 23 years. I loved him. I loved him more than I have words for. But I have also spent 23 Christmases and 23 Thanksgivings and 23 4th of July barbecues watching how the men in that family behave when there is something on the table that they think should be theirs. They circle. They scheme. They convince themselves they are owed. They do not steal outright. They persuade. They pressure. They wait until you are tired, and then they ask again. Frank was the exception in that family, not the rule. And Frank is gone. Diana nodded once. I will have the documents ready by tomorrow afternoon. Tuesday, January 14th, at 4:48 in the afternoon, I sat at that same desk and signed my name 11 times across 7 documents. My hand was steady. That surprised me. I expected it to shake. I expected some part of me to hesitate, to feel like I was doing something wrong by protecting what was legally mine. I did not. Every signature felt like a lock clicking into place. When it was done, Diana stood up. She shook my hand. She said, "Nobody is getting through this, not without going through me first." She said it in her quiet voice. The one that makes men lean forward. The one that has ended more arguments in this county than any raised voice ever has. I drove home from Diana's office on Superior Street, turned left on 21st Avenue, took the long way through Lincoln Park because I was not ready to be inside my house yet, and I pulled into my driveway at 5:22. I turned off the engine. I sat in the Subaru with my hands on the steering wheel and the heater still running and the January dark already pressing against the windows, and I exhaled. I exhaled for the first time in 8 days. A real exhale. The kind that comes from somewhere below your lungs, somewhere in the basement of your body, where you have been holding everything since the phone rang at 7:45 on a Tuesday morning, and a paramedic said your husband's name in a voice that told you everything before he said anything else. I sat in that car for 11 minutes. I know, because I watched the clock on the dashboard, 5:22 to 5:33. Then I went inside. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the one Frank and I bought at a garage sale in Cloquet in 2006 for $60, the one he sanded down to bare wood on a Sunday in October while I made him ham sandwiches and complained about the dust. The table where I sat when the pregnancy test came back positive with Ethan, the table where Ethan sat when his acceptance letter from UMD came in the mail, and I drank my tea, and I felt, for the first time since Frank died, like the ground under me was not moving. I did not know how long that feeling would last. It lasted about 14 hours. What I did not know, what I could not have known sitting there with my tea and my $60 table and my sense of temporary safety, was how fast they would move. The doorbell rang at 7:45 the next morning. I was still holding my coffee. I opened the door in my bathrobe holding a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Mom." Ethan gave me that mug for Mother's Day when he was 13. I think he bought it at the Walgreens on Central Entrance. I have never replaced it because I think it is the most honest thing anyone has ever given me, and also because every other mug in my cabinet has some kind of inspirational quote about living your best life, and I find those exhausting before 8 in the morning. Donnie was on my front porch in a Carhartt jacket that had fit him about 15 pounds ago. Ethan was behind him, one step lower, looking at the welcome mat. The welcome mat says, "Oh hello," in cursive. Patrice gave it to me. I did not pick it out. I want that on the record. I did not invite them in. I need to say that clearly because what happened next happened because Donnie Kowalski has never in his life waited for an invitation to enter any space he believes he has a right to be in, which is every space. He walked past me into the kitchen, sat down at my table without being asked, and unzipped his jacket like he was settling in for a meeting he had called. Ethan followed him. He slid into the chair next to Donnie the way he used to slide into his seat at the dinner table when he was 12 and knew he was late. Eyes down, shoulders tight. I set my World's Okayest Mom mug on the counter and stayed standing. That table, by the way, $60. Garage sale in Cloquet, 2006. Frank stripped it down to bare wood with steel wool on a Sunday in October, while I handed him sandwiches through the garage door and told him he was making too much dust, which he was. He restained it in dark walnut. It took him 2 coats and most of a weekend. I sat at that table the morning the pregnancy test turned blue. I sat at it the night Ethan told us he was enlisting instead of finishing his degree at UMD, and Frank did not say a word for 11 minutes, which was the longest Frank had ever gone without talking while conscious. And now I was standing in my own kitchen watching my brother-in-law once removed sit down at that table like it was a conference room and pull out an iPad with a little flourish, like a man performing a magic trick for a child he thinks is not very bright. Donnie set the iPad on the table. He tapped the screen. He looked up at me with a face that was doing its best impression of grief, the kind of grief you might see in a man who has practiced it in front of a bathroom mirror. His eyes were soft. His brow was furrowed. His mouth was set in that particular shape that men make when they want you to believe they are being brave about something difficult. He said, "Lindy, this is hard for me, for all of us, but Frank left something behind that I think you need to see." He pressed play. The screen showed Frank. My Frank, sitting on a couch I recognized as the one in Donnie's apartment above the shop. It was Christmas Eve. I knew because there was a tree in the background with those big colored bulbs that Donnie has used every year since the 90s, and Frank was wearing the red flannel shirt I had given him the Christmas before, the one with the tiny hole near the collar where he caught it on a nail in the garage. He was holding a beer. His face was flushed. He was smiling. He was alive. I had not seen Frank move since the morning of January 7th. I had not heard his voice since the night before he died, when he kissed me on the side of the head in the kitchen and said, "Good night, Lynn. Leave the porch light on. It's supposed to snow." That was the last thing my husband ever said to me. Leave the porch light on. On the iPad, Frank leaned forward. His eyes were glassy. He was at least 3 beers in, probably 4. He grinned and said, all right, here's the deal. Donnie gets the shop. Ethan gets the house. And Lindy gets the lake." The video stopped. Donnie tapped the screen to pause it, gently, like he was closing a Bible. He looked up at me. His face was still doing the grief performance. He said, "That is what Frank wanted, Lindy. Those were his wishes. We just want to honor them." He said, "The word wishes the way a man says it when he has been practicing it in his truck on the way over. Slow, reverent, like it was a word from Scripture and not a word he was using to try to take my house. Here's what I want you to know. I heard my husband's voice on that video, and my heart cracked in a place I did not know it could crack. I heard him say my name. I heard him laugh. I heard the way he said Lindy with that slight uptick at the end, like my name was a question he enjoyed asking, and I wanted to fall apart. I wanted to sit down on the kitchen floor and press that play button over and over and listen to him say my name until the battery died. But I also knew something that Donnie did not know I knew. I knew Frank Kowalski. I knew him the way you know someone. After 23 years of sleeping next to them and eating across from them, and arguing about the thermostat and watching them fall asleep in a recliner with spearmint gum still in their mouth. I knew my husband's real voice, and I knew his joke voice. And on that video, Frank Kowalski was using his joke voice, the one he used when he said things like, "Sure, the Vikings are going to the Super Bowl this year and I'm going to start eating salads on Monday." He was kidding. He was 3 beers deep on Christmas Eve, sitting on his cousin's couch, and he was kidding. And whoever was holding that phone had stopped recording before the punchline. I did not say any of this. I looked at Donnie. I looked at the iPad. I looked at my son, who had not said a single word since he walked through my door. I said, "I will need to look this over. I will call you Friday." Donnie smiled, the smile of a man who believed he had just closed a deal. "Of course. Take your time. We just want to do right by Frank." Ethan finally looked up at me. For 1 second, maybe 2, his face did something I had seen exactly twice before in his life. Once when he was 7 and broke the garage window with a hockey puck. Once when he was 17 and I caught him sneaking back in through the basement after curfew. It was the face of a boy who knew he was standing on the wrong side of something and could hear the ice cracking underneath him. I let him sit in it. They left. I locked the door. I stood in my kitchen for about 3 minutes, staring at the spot on the table where the iPad had been, the table Frank sanded by hand, the table where our son was conceived in theory, if not in geography, the table where I was now being told, by a man who has never once in his life built anything of his own, that my husband wanted to give me a lake cabin and a pat on the head. Then I walked into Frank's den. And I started looking for everything my husband had ever recorded, written, saved, or filed. Because if there was a video of Frank saying one thing on Christmas Eve, there was a very good chance there was more of that video somewhere, and I intended to find it. Saturday morning, Ethan came by with a duffel bag and a silence that filled the entire house. I was in the kitchen. I had made coffee because that is what I do. The world could be ending, and I would put on a pot of Folgers before I looked out the window to check. I heard his key in the front door. He still had his key. I had not asked for it back. I did not know yet whether I would. He did not come into the kitchen. He went straight upstairs to his room, the room that was still his room because I had not changed it. The Duluth Bulldogs poster was still on the wall above his bed. The one from the 2017 season when they went to the Frozen Four and Ethan was 16, and Frank drove him 4 hours to St. Paul to watch the semifinal, and they came home at 2 in the morning with the boy asleep in the truck, foam finger still on his hand. The bookshelf still had his old copies of Harry Potter and a Pee Wee hockey trophy that said Most Improved, which Frank was unreasonably proud of because, and I quote, "That means he started bad and got better, and that is basically the whole point of being alive." He came downstairs with the duffel over his shoulder, set it by the door, said he was going to stay somewhere else for a while, clear his head. Clear his head. That is not a phrase 24-year-old boys come up with on their own. That is a phrase someone older teaches them, someone who knows the words sound reasonable and almost therapeutic, and that a mother will not argue because what kind of mother argues with a son who needs to clear his head? A smart one, actually. But I was not feeling smart that morning. I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Donnie's for a little while." I nodded. I picked up my coffee. Then he went into the garage. I followed him because my body moved before my brain could stop it. He was standing in front of Frank's snap-on tool chest, red metal, 5 drawers, 3 feet tall. Frank bought it in 2005, the year after he opened the shop. He could not afford a full set, so he bought the chest empty and filled it one tool at a time over 20 years. Every birthday, every Christmas, every finished job, he would buy one more piece from the snap-on truck when it came through Duluth. A ratchet, a torque wrench, a set of metric sockets. Each drawer was organized with foam cutouts, so you could see at a glance if anything was missing. He had his name engraved on the lid, F. Kowalski in block letters, done at the trophy shop on London Road for $12. He once told me that chest was the first real thing he ever owned that made him feel like he had built something. Ethan unlatched the lid, looked inside, closed it, grabbed the handles on both sides. I said, "Ethan." He did not look at me. He said, "Dad would have wanted me to have these." I do not know if that is true. The dead do not get to want things, which is the cruelest part of dying, I think. Not the leaving, the silence after. The way the living put words in your mouth that you cannot correct. I could have stopped him. Legally, everything in that garage was mine. But he was my son, and he was carrying his father's tools. And there are limits to what a woman can say to her own child before the words start tasting like metal in her mouth. He loaded the chest into his truck in 2 trips and strapped it down with bungee cords the way Frank would have done. And I noticed that the muscle memory of a boy who had watched his father tie things down 1,000 times, and it hit me somewhere behind my ribs where I keep the things I cannot say out loud. He pulled out of the driveway. He did not wave. He did not look back. I watched from the garage until his taillights turned left on 3rd Street and disappeared. I sat down on the concrete step between the garage and the back door, the step where Frank used to sit in the summer with the Laneys after mowing the lawn. The step where Ethan sat when he was 6, and I taught him to tie his shoes. The step with a crack running through it that Frank was going to fix next spring. There is no next spring. I sat there for 3 hours. I watched the shadow of the garage door move across the floor. I watched the oil stain from 2011, when Frank tried to change his own oil and watched the Bulldogs game on his phone at the same time and spilled half a quart. I watched the empty space where the snap-on chest had been, and I thought about how a space can look exactly the same as before and still feel like a wound. When I got up, my back ached and my feet were numb. I walked into the kitchen, opened the freezer, and took out a container of lefse that Patrice had brought 2 days after the funeral. Homemade, rolled thin, the way her grandmother taught her. I ate 4 pieces standing over the sink without butter or sugar, cold and stiff and plain, the saddest lefse I have ever eaten. I would like to formally apologize to Patrice's grandmother, who is no longer with us, but whose recipes deserve better than to be consumed by a woman in 4-day-old jeans standing over a sink at 6 in the evening. I went to bed at 7:15 in my clothes. The next evening, Sunday, my doorbell rang at 6. Megan Torres on my porch holding a Tupperware of sugar cookies with pink sprinkles and a sympathy card from her mother. She came in. She set them on the counter. She stood in my kitchen picking at her cuticle the way women do when they are working up to something they are afraid to say. She asked how I was doing. She asked if I needed groceries. She asked 3 other things that were not really questions. There was something else she had come to say. I could feel it the way you feel weather change before you see it. A pressure drop. A stillness. She did not say it. She hugged me, and the hug lasted 3 seconds longer than normal, which is how you know someone is holding something back. She left. I stood in the doorway watching her drive away in that gray Civic with the Teach Kindness bumper sticker and Benson's nose pressed against the back window, making a fog circle on the glass. And I knew, the way you know when ice on the lake has gone from solid to dangerous, when the color shifts from white to gray, and you can hear it whispering underneath, that girl was carrying something she was afraid to set down. The last week of January, I started going through Frank's files at the shop. Not the customer files. Not the invoices or the receipts or the stack of warranty claims that Frank kept in a milk crate under the counter because he did not trust filing cabinets. The other files, the ones on his computer? I went to the shop on a Tuesday night after dark. I had not been there since the day Frank died. Kyle Gunderson, Frank's lead mechanic, had been keeping things running. Kyle is 35 years old, quiet in the way that men from the Iron Range are quiet, which is to say, he will go 4 hours without speaking and then say one sentence that is worth all 4 hours. Frank hired Kyle when Kyle was 19, fresh out of Mesabi Range College with a diesel tech certificate and a work ethic that Frank described as the kid does not know how to stop. Frank taught him everything: how to diagnose by sound, how to talk to customers without lying to them, which Frank considered an art form, how to run a shop that people trust. Kyle once told me, at a Christmas party at our house, standing by the fridge with the Lineys in his hand, that Frank was the closest thing to a father he had ever had. His real father left when he was 4. I did not know what to say to that, so I handed him another beer and said, Well, he thinks you are the best mechanic in St. Louis County, which was true. The shop was cold, January cold. The kind of cold where the concrete floor sends the chill straight up through your boots into your spine. The overhead fluorescents buzzed. The lift where Frank died was in Bay 2. I did not look at it. I walked past it into the office, sat down in Frank's chair, the one with the cracked leather, and turned on the computer. Frank's password was on a post-it note stuck to the inside of his desk drawer. Lindy Ethan 2004, followed by an exclamation point. Our names and the year we got married. Written in Frank's handwriting, which looked like a man had tried to teach a bird to hold a pen. This was his approach to cybersecurity. A post-it in a drawer. The man survived 53 Minnesota winters and did not see any reason to update his relationship with technology. The desktop had the usual mess. Folders everywhere. QuickBooks. A shortcut to the Duluth Bulldogs schedule. A folder called Taxes Do Not Delete, which Frank had apparently yelled at himself in writing. And one folder, sitting in the bottom left corner of the screen, labeled Donnie BS. My husband was not a subtle man. I opened it. Inside were 51 emails, printed to PDF, dating back to October of 2024, 3 months before Frank died. Donnie asking about the shop's value. Donnie floating ideas about restructuring the business to keep it in the family. Donnie mentioning that he had been talking to a buddy who does commercial real estate and who said the shop and the 2 lots on Raleigh Street were worth more than Frank probably realized. Donnie suggesting in November that maybe it was time to think about succession planning and that he, Donnie, would be the natural choice to take over if Frank ever wanted to step back. Frank's responses were short. Some were one line. Donnie, drop it. Donnie, I told you no. Donnie, the shop is mine. I bought you out in 2019. That was the deal. Stop. The last email from Frank to Donnie was dated December 20th, 2024, 18 days before Frank died. It said, Donnie, if you bring this up at Christmas, I will throw you out of my own house and you can walk home in the snow. I am not joking. Drop it. I sat in that chair and I read that email 4 times. I heard Frank's voice in every word, the hard consonants, the short sentences. The way he wrote, exactly the way he talked, which is to say directly and without decoration. Frank did not waste words in life, and he did not waste them in email. Then I found something else. Buried in a subfolder labeled Donnie BS Legal, there was a draft email to Diana Blackwood, dated December 22nd, 2 days after the last email to Donnie. It was never sent. Frank had written it and saved it and either forgotten or decided to wait until after the holidays. It read, Diana, I need to talk to you after New Year's about formally removing Donnie from any association with the shop. He's been pushing hard about the business, and I want to make sure everything is locked down tight. I don't want Lindy dealing with this if something happens to me. Can we set up a meeting first week of January? If something happens to me. Frank wrote that on December 22nd. He died on January 7th. I stared at that unsent email for a long time. The fluorescents buzzed. The space heater ticked. Bay 2 was dark through the office window. I felt something cold and still settle into my chest, the way fog settles on the lake in early morning. Not grief. Not anger. Clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally see the whole picture, and it is exactly as ugly as you were afraid it was. Donnie had been circling for at least 3 months. Probably longer. He had been in Frank's ear about the business, the lots, the value, the future. And Frank had been pushing him back harder each time until the last email that was basically a threat to throw him into a snowbank on Christmas Day. And then Frank had sat down to write his lawyer about locking Donnie out permanently, and then Frank had died before he could press send. The next morning I came back early and found Kyle already there, 7 o'clock, coffee in hand, checking the schedule. I asked him to sit down in the break room. I asked him straight. Had Donnie been doing anything unusual at the shop in the last few months? Kyle looked at his coffee. He looked at the wall. He looked at me. Then he said, yeah. He told me Donnie had been quietly steering 2 of the shop's biggest fleet accounts, the Petersons' delivery vans and the county road crew trucks, to a buddy's shop in Proctor. Told the customers that Kowalski's was going through some changes and that they would get better service elsewhere. Kyle had found out in December and told Frank. Frank had been furious. That was the week before Christmas. I thanked Kyle. I went back to the office. I saved everything to a flash drive, a small black SanDisk that I put in the inside pocket of my coat and zipped shut. I locked the office. I drove home through snow that was falling sideways off the lake, the kind of snow that moves horizontal instead of down and hits your windshield like it has somewhere to be. And the next morning, Donnie filed his lawsuit. February 10th, Donnie filed a formal challenge in St. Louis County Probate Court. The document was 11 pages long and used the word fraudulently 4 times, which is 3 more times than any honest document needs to use it. He claimed that he and Frank had maintained an unwritten partnership agreement since 2005, that the buyout in 2019 was never fully executed, and that I had, and I am reading this directly from the filing because it is burned into my memory the way a brand burns into wood, fraudulently transferred marital assets into an irrevocable trust instrument for the purpose of excluding rightful family stakeholders from their established interest in the Kowalski family business. Rightful family stakeholders. I had to read that phrase 3 times before I understood that he meant himself. Donnie Kowalski, a man who had been living rent-free above my husband's garage for 8 years, who had been steering Frank's customers to another shop for kickbacks, who had recorded my husband drunk on Christmas Eve and cut the video before the punchline, was now standing in a court filing, calling himself a rightful family stakeholder. Diana called me at noon. She had already read it. She said, "It is loud and it is ugly, and it has the legal weight of a paper napkin. But we need to take it seriously, because loud and ugly cost money to silence, and this man clearly intends to be both." She told me she would file our response within 2 weeks. She told me to keep living my life. She told me not to talk to Donnie or Ethan about anything related to the estate. I told her I understood. Then I went back to work. I had returned to Denfeld High School the Monday after the funeral. I had taken 3 days off. 3 days to bury a husband and rearrange a life. The district gave me bereavement leave. I could have taken 2 weeks. I took 3 days because I have been sitting behind that front desk for 17 years, and I did not know what to do with myself in a quiet house, and because the phone at Denfeld rings 40 times a day, and answering it gave me something to do with my hands that was not opening the freezer and eating cold lefse at 6 in the evening. The school was my normal. My face was my normal. I have a face I wear at that front desk. It is a good face. It says, "I am competent, I am pleasant, I will help you find the right form." I have been practicing it for 17 years. It has gotten me through parent complaints, budget cuts, 2 principal changes, a fire drill that turned out to be a real fire, which is a story for another time, and now apparently the slow, public unraveling of my personal life. The problem was Janet Kovic. Janet is 40 years old, has been in the attendance office for 6 years, and is, how do I say this in a way that is accurate but not actionable, the kind of person who collects other people's business the way some people collect stamps. Quietly, methodically, and with great satisfaction. Janet plays in a hockey mom group that meets every other Tuesday at the Duluth Curling Club for drinks and gossip in roughly equal portions. Donnie's ex-wife, his second one, Sharon, plays in the same group. They sit at the same table, they drink the same white Zinfandel out of plastic cups, they talk. Around the second week of February, Janet started finding me in the break room. She had a way of appearing next to the coffee pot at the exact moment I was pouring a cup, the way a seagull appears the moment you open a bag of chips on the pier. She asked me how I was holding up. She said she bet I had been busy with paperwork. She said, "Big estate, I imagine," with a smile that had too many teeth in it. I said, "Frank was a hard-working man, Janet." She said, "He sure was." I poured my coffee. I did not turn around. I made a mental note, filed it under deal with later, walked back to my desk and answered the phone and told Mrs. Bergstrom that her son had indeed missed third period again and that perhaps a conversation at home might be in order. But the air at school had changed. I could feel it the way you feel a draft under a door. 3 coworkers stopped making eye contact in the hallway. Linda in guidance started forgetting to copy me on emails I needed. The lunch table where I had eaten my turkey sandwich every day for 9 years suddenly had no open seat on Thursday, which could have been a coincidence. It was not a coincidence. Then on a Friday afternoon, Carol Magnuson pulled me into the supply room. Carol is 52, teaches algebra, has a voice like warm flannel, and does not waste a single minute of anyone's time. She closed the door behind us. She put her hand on my arm. She said, "Lindy, I am only telling you this because I would want someone to tell me. Janet has been saying that you were shopping for lake cabins online before Frank was even in the ground. She told 3 people in the teacher's lounge that you were looking at real estate listings on your phone during the funeral." My face went hot. I felt my pulse in my eardrums. I had been on my phone at the funeral exactly once, to text Kyle at the shop to ask him to lock the bay doors because I had forgotten. I thanked Carol. I went back to my desk. I worked until 4:30. I smiled at 2 parents. I confirmed 3 appointments. I rescheduled a meeting for the vice principal. I answered the phone 11 more times. And then I walked out to my Subaru in the parking lot, sat in the driver's seat, closed the door, and screamed into my steering wheel until my throat hurt. Nobody saw me. The lot was empty. Just me and a plastic bag from the Super One tumbling across the asphalt in the February wind like the world's saddest tumbleweed. I drove home. I did not cry. I had not cried since the morning they told me Frank's heart had stopped on that lift in the cold. I was saving it. I did not know yet what I was saving it for, but I knew it was not going to be wasted on a parking lot and a woman named Janet who drinks white Zinfandel at a curling club and thinks she knows my life. Saturday, March 1st. 8:15 in the morning. My phone rang on the kitchen counter next to a bowl of oatmeal I had made and was not going to eat. Diana's name on the screen. Diana does not call on Saturdays. In 9 years, she has called me on a Saturday exactly once, and that was to tell me that a property tax appeal had been approved and she was excited about it, which tells you everything you need to know about what excites Diana Blackwood. This was not an excited call. I could hear it in the first syllable. Her voice had a tightness to it, a held breath quality, like a woman choosing her words the way a surgeon chooses an incision point. She said, "Lindy, there is a new filing in the case. I need you to come to my office. Now, if you can." I said, "It is Saturday." She said, "I know what day it is." I drove downtown without doing my hair. I did not brush my teeth. I put on the coat I had been wearing for 3 days and the boots by the door, and I drove to Superior Street with the heater on full and the radio off, because I did not want to hear a human voice that was not about to tell me something I needed to know. Diana was already at her desk. The cinnamon roll tradition had been suspended. There was coffee, but it was sitting untouched. Her reading glasses were on. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk, to me the way a doctor slides test results, face down, like the paper itself might bite. I picked it up. I turned it over. Affidavit of Ethan Frank Kowalski. My son's full name. The name Frank and I gave him in a hospital room at Street. Luke's on a Wednesday afternoon in July of 2001, when the rain was coming down so hard the parking lot flooded, and Frank had to carry my overnight bag on his head like a man crossing a river. We named him Ethan because I liked the way it sounded, and Frank because it was Frank's father's name. And Frank's father had died the year before, and Frank had carried that grief in his chest like a stone he could not put down. We gave our son that name so that something of his grandfather would continue. And now that name was at the top of a court document. He had signed it on February 22nd at a FedEx office in Superior, Wisconsin, not in Duluth, in Superior, across the bridge, in another state. I do not know if that detail was strategic or if it was simply where Donnie drove him, but I noticed it. A man does not take his nephew across a state line to sign a document at a FedEx office unless he wants some distance between the act and the place where people know them. The language was stiff. Legal phrasing that Ethan did not write and probably did not fully understand, but the meaning was clear even through the starch of it. He stated that since his father's death, his mother had exhibited signs of emotional instability and irrational financial behavior, that she had made significant asset transfers without consulting family members, that he was concerned about her decision-making capacity, that he believed his uncle Donnie was acting in what would have been his father's best interest. His signature was at the bottom, the same signature he had been making since 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary, when Mrs. Halverson's class spent a week on cursive, and Ethan came home so proud of his capital E that he signed everything in the house for a month. He signed the refrigerator with a dry erase marker. He signed the dog. He signed his own forehead in the bathroom mirror, backwards, and then could not get the ink off for 2 days. Frank laughed so hard he choked on his dinner. That signature, on this paper. I put the document down on Diana's desk. I did not say anything for about a minute, maybe longer. The clock on Diana's wall ticked. The harbor was gray through the window. A seagull sat on the railing of the parking garage across the street and stared at me through the glass with the dead eyes of a creature that has never once in its life felt guilt. Then I said, "Diana, how bad is this?" Diana took off her glasses. She did the bridge of the nose thing she does when she is organizing her thoughts into a sentence that will be both honest and survivable. She put the glasses back on. She said, "It is not fatal. The affidavit is thin. There is no documentation behind it, no medical records, no financial irregularities, nothing that would stand up to 5 minutes of scrutiny. But Lindy, I have to be honest with you, a son testifying against his mother carries weight in front of a judge. It should not, but it does. Optics matter in probate court. We need to neutralize this." I said, "How?" She said, "We need evidence that this was coordinated, that Ethan did not arrive at these conclusions independently, that someone put him up to it." I nodded. I picked up my coat. I thanked her. I walked out of her office and down the stairs and across the lobby and through the front door into the March air, which in Duluth is still winter air, still cold enough to make your nostrils stick together, still carrying the iron smell of the lake. I got in my car. My hands were cold. Not from the weather, cold from the inside. The kind of cold that starts behind your sternum and spreads to your fingertips like ice forming on a window. That has happened to me exactly twice before. Once when Ethan was 6 and fell off the top of the slide at Observation Hill Park and lay on the ground without moving for 4 seconds. That lasted a year. Once when the phone rang at 7:45 on a January morning and a paramedic said my husband's name. I drove home. I did not cry. I walked inside. I took off my coat. I hung it on the hook by the door, the hook Frank installed crooked in 2009 and never fixed because he said it gave the entryway character. I was standing in the kitchen, filling the kettle for tea when my phone rang. Megan! She was crying so hard I could not understand the first 3 things she said. The 4th thing she said was clear enough. "Mrs. Kowalski, I am in the Target parking lot on Miller Hill and I do not know where to go." I told her to come to my house right now. I said it in the voice I use when a sophomore shows up at my desk at Denfeld having a panic attack about a geometry test. Clear, warm, no room for negotiation. I said, "You are going to get in your car. You are going to drive to my house. You are going to park in the driveway. And I am going to make you breakfast. Do you understand me?" She said, "Yes, ma'am." She was at my door 20 minutes later, mascara down both cheeks, an overnight bag over one shoulder that looked like it had been packed in the dark by a person who was crying while packing it, and at the end of a leash, Benson. Benson is Megan's yellow lab mix. He is 75 pounds of enthusiasm and poor decision-making. He has the face of a dog who loves everyone and the impulse control of a dog who loves everything that can be chewed, swallowed, or destroyed. He walked into my living room, sniffed the couch, and within 45 seconds had removed a cushion and begun disassembling it with the focus and efficiency of a man on a deadline. That was the second cushion Benson had eaten in my house in 2 visits. There is a pattern. I am aware of it. I have accepted it. When Megan moved toward the couch to stop him, I said, "Leave him. I have bigger problems than a cushion right now. Come sit down." Megan sat at my kitchen table, the $60 table from Cloquet, the table where I had watched Donnie play his video, the table where Ethan used to eat cereal on Saturday mornings with milk running down his chin while Frank read him the sports page out loud like it was a bedtime story. That table has held a lot of weight in its life. It was about to hold more. I made breakfast. Eggs scrambled with cheese. Bacon, the thick kind from the meat counter at the Super One, because I do not buy the thin kind. Toast with butter. A full pot of coffee. I did this because Megan looked like a girl who had been running on gas station snacks in fear for at least 12 hours, and because making breakfast is what I do when I do not know what else to do. My mother did it. Her mother did it. When the world falls apart in our family, someone gets up and cracks an egg. It is not heroism, it is muscle memory. Megan ate. She ate like she had not seen real food in a day, which, as it turned out, she had not. She finished everything on her plate. She picked up a piece of bacon with her fingers and ate it in 2 bites. Then she pushed her plate to the side and she wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, and she looked at me. She told me about the dinner. Thursday night, Donnie's apartment, the one above the shop that used to be Frank's shop, in the space that I now technically owned but had not yet had the heart to deal with. Donnie had made pot roast, which surprised me because I did not think Donnie cooked. Megan said it was dry. I filed that information away for no particular reason, except that it confirmed something I had always suspected about Donnie's ability to execute basic tasks. The four of them around the table, Donnie, Ethan, Megan, and Donnie's current girlfriend, a woman named Tammy who works at the gas station on Grand Avenue, and who I have met once and have no opinion about because she smiled at me and said nothing, which is more than I can say for most people in this story. Donnie was talking. Donnie is always talking. He was talking about how unreasonable I was being, how Frank would be ashamed, how all he had ever wanted was to keep the family business in the family, and how I was making it impossible by, and this was his phrase, lawyering up like she's got something to hide. Megan said Ethan agreed with him. Not loudly, not with a speech, just a nod, a few words. The way a man agrees when he has stopped thinking for himself and started borrowing someone else's anger because his own is too confusing. And then Ethan called me a word. I am not going to say it on this channel. It starts with an S, and it means that a person cares only about themselves. He said it casually, the way you say a word when it has been handed to you so many times by someone else that it stops feeling like a weapon and starts feeling like a fact. Megan put down her fork. She said, "Ethan, that is your mother." Ethan looked at her. He said, "She is not acting like one." Megan told me she stood up. She said she could not be with someone who talked about his own mama that way. She picked up her purse. She walked to the door. Ethan did not stand up. He did not follow her. Donnie kept eating. She got to her car. By the time she reached the end of the block, Ethan had texted her. One line, "Don't bother coming back." She drove. She did not know where to go. She was not from Duluth originally. She grew up in Cloquet. Her parents had moved to Arizona 2 years ago for her father's arthritis. She had no family within 3 hours. She drove north on I-35, then turned around. She drove west toward Cloquet, then turned around again. At some point, she ended up in the Cracker Barrel parking lot in Hermantown, and she sat there with the engine running, and Benson in the passenger seat eating a Slim Jim that she had bought at the gas station in Carlton. She reclined her seat. She pulled her coat over herself like a blanket. Benson put his head on her lap. She slept in that parking lot until 6 in the morning when an employee knocked on her window to ask if she was okay. She was not okay, but she said she was, because that is what women say in parking lots at 6 in the morning when they have nowhere to go. She drove around for another 2 hours. She ended up at the Target on Miller Hill because it was open and because Target is the kind of store that feels safe even when nothing else does. She sat in the parking lot with her phone in her hand, and she called me because she did not know who else to call. I listened to all of this. I did not interrupt. I refilled her coffee when it got low. Benson had finished with the cushion and was now lying on the kitchen floor with his head on my foot, which I took as either affection or a strategic play for more bacon. Both were acceptable. When Megan finished talking, she was quiet for a moment. She put her hands flat on the table. She looked me in the eyes, and she said something that changed the shape of everything. "Mrs. Kowalski, there is something I need to show you. I should have shown you weeks ago. I have been scared." She pulled out her phone. What followed was the longest 45 minutes of my life, and I say that as a woman who sat through a 4-hour parent-teacher conference in 2016 where a father tried to explain to me why his son's attendance record was a philosophical disagreement with the concept of mornings. Megan had screenshots, 52 of them. Text messages between Donnie Kowalski and Ethan Kowalski dated October 17, 2024 through February 19, 2025, nearly 4 months, starting 3 months before Frank died. She handed me the phone. I put on my reading glasses, the ones I keep on a chain around my neck because I have accepted what I am, and I started scrolling. I am going to give you some of these. Not all 52. Some of them are logistical, some are small talk. Some are Donnie sending Ethan links to YouTube videos about investing, which is almost funny if you think about it. But the ones that matter, the ones that are burned into me, the way Frank's handwriting is burned into me, I am going to read to you. Donnie to Ethan, October 17th. Hey bud, question. Has your dad ever talked to you about the shop, what he plans to do with it? Ethan to Donnie, same day. Not really. I think he wants to keep going a while. Why? Donnie to Ethan, November 3rd. Just been thinking. If anything ever happened to your dad, your mom would inherit everything. That's a lot for one person to handle, especially someone who's never run a business. You ever think about that? Ethan to Donnie, November 3rd. I guess not. Lol. Donnie to Ethan, November 24th. Listen, I love your mom, but your dad and I always had an understanding about the shop staying in family blood. You and me, that's family blood. Your mom married into it. Just keep that in mind. I stopped scrolling at that one. I set the phone on the table. I walked to the sink. I turned on the faucet and let the water run over my hands because I needed to feel something that was not the inside of my own chest. I looked out the window at the bird feeder that Frank had mounted on a pole in the backyard in 2015. It was empty. The chickadees had cleaned it out and I had not refilled it since Frank died because it was his job and I had not been able to touch it. I stood there for about 30 seconds. Then I turned off the water. I dried my hands. I picked the phone back up. Donnie to Ethan, January 8th. The day after Frank died. 24 hours after my husband's heart stopped on the floor of his own shop. Don't say anything to your mom yet. She's in shock. We need to wait until she's vulnerable but coherent. Let me know when she stops crying. That's when we move. Let me know when she stops crying. I put the phone down again. I did not go to the sink this time. I did not move. I sat at that table and I looked at those words on that screen, and I felt something inside me go very, very still. Like the bottom of the lake in January. Like the air in a room when someone has just left it and you know they are not coming back. Let me know when she stops crying. That's when we move. I picked the phone up. There were more. Donnie coaching Ethan on what to say. Donnie telling Ethan in mid-January that the video would be enough. Donnie telling Ethan that the condo situation is fair, she still gets the lake house. That's generous. Donnie telling Ethan in early February that your mom is smarter than we thought. We need to move faster. Donnie on February 12th, the day he filed the lawsuit, texting Ethan, it's filed. Now we wait. She'll fold. Donnie on February 19th, 3 days before Ethan signed the affidavit. The affidavit will scare her. She'll settle. Trust me on this. Just sign it and I'll handle the rest. Just sign it. Trust me. I'll handle the rest. That is how you get a 24-year-old boy to sign a paper saying his mother is losing her mind. You do not force him. You do not threaten him. You say, trust me, so many times that the boy stops using his own judgment and starts using yours. You fill the space where his father used to be with your voice and your confidence and your plan, and the boy follows because he is grieving and lost, and you are the only person in the room who sounds like you know what comes next. I set the phone down. I looked at Megan. She was crying again. Quietly this time. The kind of crying that does not make noise because the person has been doing it so long they have learned how to do it without being heard. I said, Megan, why did you not show me sooner? She said, because he is your son, and I did not want to be the person who broke your family. I kept thinking he would come to his senses. I kept thinking Donnie would stop. I am so sorry. I reached across that $60 table and I held her hand. I said, honey, you did not break this family. Donnie broke this family, and you are going to help me put it back together. Then she showed me one more thing. The video. The full video. The one Donnie had cut at the 47-second mark before showing it to me on his iPad in my kitchen. Megan had found it on a cloud backup. Ethan had logged into Donnie's Google account on their shared laptop to check something weeks earlier, and the account had stayed logged in. Megan had been looking for something else entirely, a photo Donnie had taken at Thanksgiving, when she found a video file dated December 24th. She opened it, she watched it, and she knew. She pressed play on her phone. Frank on Donnie's couch, red flannel shirt, beer in hand, Christmas tree behind him. All right, here's the deal. Donnie gets the shop, Ethan gets the house, and Lindy gets the lake. And then the part Donnie had cut. Frank grinned. He leaned back. He laughed, that big warm laugh that I used to hear from the living room while I was washing dishes, the laugh that made the whole house feel like it had a heartbeat. He reached over and slapped Donnie on the shoulder and said, I'm kidding you, idiot. Everything goes to Lindy. That woman earned every bolt in this place. Every bolt in this place. I heard my husband's voice say my name and say that I had earned everything, and I put the phone down on the table and I looked out the window at the empty bird feeder, and I did not move for 30 seconds because if I moved, I was going to fall apart in a way that I could not put back together. In front of this girl who needed me to be strong. Then I called Diana. I read her 3 of the texts over the phone. There was a silence, a real silence, the kind of silence Diana uses when words have failed her, which I did not think was possible. Then Diana Blackwood, who has been practicing law for 35 years and who speaks so softly that grown men lean forward to hear her, said 2 words I had never heard her say in 9 years of friendship and legal counsel. She said, "Oh, honey." Then she said, "Bring her to my office Monday morning. I want every one of those screenshots forwarded to my email under a chain of custody protocol. And Lindy, listen to me carefully. This case just ended." That Sunday afternoon, after Megan fell asleep on my couch with Benson curled against her legs and a throw blanket pulled up to her chin, I walked into Frank's den and sat down at his desk for the first time since he died. The desk was a mess. Frank's idea of organization was to pile things in stacks and remember which stack had what, a system that worked perfectly until it did not. There were auto parts, catalogs, a mug full of pens that mostly did not work, and a framed photo of the 3 of us at Gooseberry Falls from 2014. Ethan in a Bulldogs hoodie, Frank in flannel, me squinting into the sun with a look that suggests I was about to say something about sunscreen. On the corner of the desk, a manila folder in Frank's handwriting, Cabin 2025. Inside were pencil sketches. Frank was a terrible artist. The man could rebuild a transmission blindfolded but drew like a second grader given a crayon and a dare. But I knew what every shape meant. A new dock, cedar planks, specific dimensions in the margins. A screened porch off the back, 6-sided, with a note that said bronze screen, not silver, a workbench in the garage corner. A quote from the lumber yard in 2 Harbors stapled to the back, dated November 15th, for $22,400. And in the margin of the dock sketch, underlined once in Frank's handwriting a single line. Fixed dock with Ethan, summer 25. I read that line about 30 times. Until the words stopped being words and became something else. A plan. A hope. A father's quiet faith that his son would be standing next to him on a July morning, holding the other end of a cedar plank, learning the way men in this family have always learned, not by talking about it, but by standing next to someone and doing it. Ethan was not going to be there. I closed the folder, put it in the top drawer, pulled out a yellow legal pad and a pen that worked. The 3rd one I tried, and I did what I always do when the world collapses. I made a list. Patrice once told me that when the apocalypse comes, I will be standing in the ashes with a clipboard and subheadings. She is not wrong. 3 columns. What they want, what I have, what they don't know I have. Column 3 was the longest. The flash drive, the 52 screenshots in Diana's chain of custody email. The full video. Frank's unsent draft. Kyle's testimony about the fleet accounts diverted to Proctor. Column 3 was not a list. It was a wall. Over the next 2 weeks, Diana prepared. She hired a video forensic analyst from Minneapolis, drww.com. Karen Holm, who confirmed in a 12-page report that the video had been cut at timestamp 0047. The original file was 1 minute 38 seconds. The metadata showed it had been edited on Donnie's phone on January 9th, 2 days after Frank died. Diana assembled 5 exhibits: the will, the trust, the forensic report, and full video. The screenshots with chain of custody. The emails from the flash drive, including Frank's unsent draft. She called me on a Wednesday and said, "The hearing is April 15th. Do nothing between now and then except live your life." I did my best. The night before the hearing, Monday, April 14th, Patrice had been at my house until 8. She brought wild rice soup from the bakery, which is not technically a bakery item, but Patrice has never let a menu stop her from feeding people what she thinks they need. She hugged me at the door, told me to sleep, told me she would be at the courthouse at 9. Then she left, and the house was very quiet. I was sitting at the kitchen table with tea I was not drinking, looking at a photograph of Ethan I had taken from the album. About 3 years old, sitting in a kiddie pool in the backyard wearing nothing but a swim diaper and a bulldog's cap 4 sizes too big. The hat covered his eyes. He was grinning anyway. Frank's shadow was on the grass at the edge of the frame. He had been behind me, spraying the hose, soaking both of us. My phone was on the table next to the photograph. I picked it up. I started typing. "Ethan, please don't go through with this tomorrow. I love you, we can fix this. Just come home." My thumb hovered over send. It hovered for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. Benson, sleeping on the floor because Megan had gone home but left him with me for the night, shifted and made a sound like a deflating balloon. My phone rang. Patrice. She said, "Open your freezer." I said, "What?" She said it again, slower, the way she talks to me when I am being difficult, which according to her is always. I walked to the freezer. I opened it. Wedged between a bag of frozen blueberries and the last container of her grandmother's lefts was a gallon-sized Ziploc bag with a note taped to the outside in Patrice's handwriting. "Phone goes here until 7 a.m. You can thank me at the bakery. Love, P." She had planted it while I was in the bathroom earlier that evening, like a woman who had come to my house with soup and a plan. I laughed. For the first time in 3 weeks, I laughed out loud. It came out ragged and half-choked and my eyes burned, but it counted. She told me goodnight. She told me she loved me. She told me not to ruin this. I closed the freezer. I deleted the unsent text. I went to bed at 9:30 with Benson on the floor breathing like a small engine, and I slept. For the first time in 2 months, I slept through the night without waking at 3 a.m, listening for a sound that was never going to come again. Tuesday morning, I wore a dark green dress that Frank bought me for our 20th anniversary at a shop in Canal Park that no longer exists. It was a small place between the bookstore and the fudge shop, run by a woman named Helen who closed up in 2022 and moved to Ashland. Frank had walked in there on a Saturday afternoon while I was next door, looking at paperbacks, and came out with a bag and a look on his face like a man who had just gotten away with something. He gave it to me that night at dinner. He said, "I don't know anything about dresses, but the lady in the store said green is your color, and I trust her more than I trust myself. It fit perfectly." I wore it to dinner that night at the boat club. I have worn it 4 times since. This was the 5th. Diana had told me weeks earlier what to wear. No black, it looks like you are performing grief. No red, it looks aggressive. No jewelry that looks expensive. Wear something a teacher would wear to a school board meeting where she wanted to be taken seriously but not noticed. This was a probate hearing, not a jury trial, but Diana likes a theme. I got to the courthouse at 9:20. St. Louis County Courthouse, downtown Duluth, 5th Avenue West. Old building, high ceilings. The kind of architecture that was built to make human beings feel small and the law feel large. It does both effectively. Donnie was already there. He was wearing a navy suit I had never seen in 23 years of family gatherings. New, off the rack from somewhere that does not measure inseams carefully. There was a tag still attached to the back vent, a small white rectangle fluttering every time he moved. I did not notice at first. Patrice did. She elbowed me in the hallway hard enough that I will probably have a bruise in the afterlife. She whispered, "Tag." I looked, I saw it, I stored it, I moved on. Ethan was with him, white button-up, dark slacks. He looked like a young man who had not slept properly in about 6 weeks, which was accurate. There were circles under his eyes, the color of dishwater. His shirt was ironed, but his face was not. He looked the way people look when they have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have just started to realize they cannot put it down. Their attorney was a man named Ray Prescott. Ray was wearing a pinstripe suit, a gold watch the size of a small clock, and a pinky ring. A pinky ring. Patrice noticed it before I noticed the tag and elbowed me twice in the span of 30 seconds, which I believe is a personal record for her. Ray had the look of a man who had been a very successful attorney in 1994 and had not updated anything since, including his confidence. Patrice, by the way, had insisted on coming. She sat in the back row in a charcoal blazer that I had never seen her wear in 29 years of friendship. She looked like a woman who had watched a legal drama the night before and taken notes. Her hair was up. Her earrings were small. She was sitting with her hands folded like a woman waiting for communion, except with the energy of a woman waiting for a fight. I love her more than I love most things on this earth. Megan was there too, 3 rows back, hands folded in her lap, in a gray cardigan and flats. She was prepared to testify if Diana needed her. She had driven in from Cloquet that morning. Benson was in the car in the parking garage, with the windows cracked and a chew toy that I suspected would not survive the hearing. Okay, hold on. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, I need to stop for a second. Thank you for being here. I know this has been a long story. I know you have stayed with me through a funeral and a fake video and a son who signed a paper against his own mother and a dog who has eaten 2 of my couch cushions. The fact that you are still here means something to me. So if any part of this story is sitting with you somewhere real, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Then go to the comments and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. A woman in Portland at 2 in the morning. A man in Texas on his lunch break. Someone in Finland told me last week they watch while they walk their dog. I see all of you, thank you, truly. Right, where was I? The courtroom. Judge Harold Lindquist took the bench at 9:32, 20 years on the probate bench. White hair cut short, Scandinavian jaw, the kind of face that has heard every excuse a human being can invent and has stopped being impressed by any of them. He wore reading glasses and did not smile. He did not need to. The room understood him without it. Ray Prescott went first. He stood up, buttoned his pinstripe jacket, and made his case. He talked for about 25 minutes. He talked about partnership and legacy and Frank's verbal wishes. He talked about how the video represented a clear expression of intent. He used the word family approximately 40 times. He gestured at the screen where his paralegal had queued up the video. He pressed play. Frank's voice filled the courtroom. My husband's voice, in a room full of strangers and lawyers and a judge and a man with a pinky ring, Frank on Donnie's couch, red flannel, Christmas tree. Beer in hand, ginning. Donnie gets the shop, Ethan gets the house, and Lindy gets the lake. The video stopped. The room was quiet. Ray let the silence sit for a moment, the way a man lets silence sit when he thinks it is working for him. Then he turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, this is a tragic family matter that should be resolved with respect for the deceased's clearly expressed wishes." He sat down. He adjusted his pinky ring. He looked at Donnie. Donnie nodded once. The nod of a man who believed he had just won something that was never his to win. Then Diana stood up. Diana Blackwood is 5'1". She has been an attorney for 35 years. She approached the bench the way a woman approaches a locked door when she already has the key. She said, "Your Honor, I would like to enter 5 exhibits into the record. Exhibit 1. The last will and testament of Frank Dean Kowalski, executed in April of 2022 in Diana's office on Superior Street. Properly drafted. Properly witnessed by her 2 paralegals, Sandra and Kathy. Properly notarized. Sealed in her office files since the day the ink dried. The will was clear. Everything to Linda Kowalski. The house, the shop, the cabin, the lots, everything. Exhibit 2. The spousal irrevocable trust documents establishing that the $1.6 million in question were already legally my assets through beneficiary designations on the life insurance policy, the 401k, and the joint accounts, and that the transfer on January 14th was the legal repositioning of assets I already owned, not a theft, not a scheme, a woman protecting what was hers. Exhibit 3. The forensic video analysis report prepared by Dr. Karen Holm of Minneapolis. Dr. Holm's report confirmed that the video file presented by the petitioner had been edited on the phone of Donald Kowalski on January 9, 2025, 2 days after Frank's death. The original file was 1 minute and 38 seconds long. The version shown to me in my kitchen and played in this courtroom 20 minutes ago had been cut at timestamp 0047. 41 seconds of the video had been deliberately removed. Diana looked at the judge. She said, "Your Honor, I would like to play the original, unedited video for the court." Judge Lindquist nodded once. The screen lit up. Frank on Donnie's couch. Red flannel. Beer. Christmas tree. The same 47 seconds the room had already heard. Donnie gets the shop. Ethan gets the house. And Lindy gets the lake. And then the part the room had not heard. Frank grinned. He leaned back into the couch. He let out a laugh that I felt in the center of my chest, a laugh I had heard 10,000 times across 23 years, the laugh he made when he thought he was the funniest person in the room, which he usually was. He reached over and slapped Donnie on the shoulder, hard enough that you could hear it on the recording, and he said, "I'm kidding you, idiot," Everything goes to Lindy. That woman earned every bolt in this place. Every bolt in this place. My husband's voice. In a courtroom. Saying my name. Saying I had earned everything. Saying it while laughing, while alive, while sitting on a couch 3 weeks before his heart stopped on the floor of his own shop. The room was silent for 8 seconds. I know because I counted them the way you count seconds during a thunderstorm to see how far away the lightning is. 8 seconds of absolute silence. I could hear the ventilation system. I could hear someone shift in a chair 3 rows behind me. I could hear my own blood. Diana did not pause. She did not need to. Exhibit 4. 52 text message screenshots between Donald Kowalski and Ethan Kowalski, dated October 17, 2024 through February 19, 2025. Chain of custody documentation from Megan Torres's phone. Forensic copies verified by Dr. Holmes' firm. 4 months of coaching, manipulation, and a text message sent the day after my husband died that read, "Let me know when she stops crying. That's when we move." Exhibit 5. 51 emails from Donald Kowalski to Frank Kowalski, dated October through December 2024, recovered from the shop computer, including Frank's responses telling Donnie to stop, including Frank's final email threatening to throw Donnie out of his house at Christmas, including a draft email to Diana Blackwood, never sent, dated December 22nd, in which Frank asked about formally removing Donnie from any association with the business because, and these were Frank's words, "I don't want Lindy dealing with this if something happens to me." Diana walked the documents to the bench. Judge Lindquist took them. He put on his reading glasses. He read. He read for 10 minutes. I am not exaggerating. 10 full minutes of silence in that courtroom. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Ray Prescott sat with his hands on the table in front of him and did not touch his pinky ring. Donnie sat behind him, and I could hear the new suit creak every time he shifted, which was often. When the judge looked up, his face had settled into something I can only describe as decided. Not angry, not sympathetic, decided. The face of a man who has weighed something and found it very, very light. He looked at Ray Prescott first. He said, "Mr. Prescott, the video your client submitted as evidence of the decedent's wishes has been demonstrated to be a deliberately edited recording that omits the decedent's actual stated intent. The will executed in 2022 is valid, properly witnessed, and controls. I am dismissing this petition with prejudice." Ray opened his mouth. He closed it. He did not stand up. Judge Lindquist turned to Ethan. He said, "Young man, look at me." Ethan looked at him. His face was white. The judge said, "You signed an affidavit in this proceeding stating that your mother exhibited signs of emotional instability and irrational behavior. You signed it at a FedEx office in Superior, Wisconsin. You raised your hand in front of a notary and you swore that your mother was losing her capacity." He paused. "This is the same mother who raised you. Who kept your bedroom exactly the way you left it when you went to serve your country? Who was waiting for you when you came home? I want you to think very carefully, young man, about what kind of son you want to be, about who in this world has loved you longer and harder than anyone else, and about what you put your name to. Do you understand me?" Ethan's voice came out thin. "Yes, sir." The judge turned to Donnie. Donnie started to speak. He said, "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. Frank would never—" Judge Lindquist held up one finger. One finger. The room stopped. He said, "Mr. Kowalski, I am not finished. I am referring this matter and all supporting documentation to the St. Louis County District Attorney's Office for review. The potential charges they may consider include document fraud, evidence tampering, and attempted financial exploitation. Do you understand me?" Donnie opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. No sound came out. He stared at the table. The judge said, "Court is adjourned." He stood and walked out through the back. The whole thing had taken 48 minutes. Donnie Kowalski has been talking his way out of trouble since 1972. I have watched him talk his way out of parking tickets, bar tabs, 2 marriages, and a fist fight at a family reunion in 2009 that he absolutely started. The man has never met a corner he could not talk his way out of. The look on his face when the words finally failed him, when his mouth opened and nothing came out and the room was quiet and the judge was gone and there was nothing left to say. That was the quietest thing I have ever heard in a room that loud. From the back row, Patrice made a sound. I am almost certain it was a whoop. The bailiff gave her a look. She straightened up. She did not apologize. I gathered my things. I picked up my purse. I stood up from the chair where I'd been sitting for 48 minutes without moving, and my knees reminded me that I am 46 years old, and that sitting still in a courtroom is not the same as sitting still on a couch. I smoothed the green dress. I turned toward the aisle, and there he was. Ethan was standing at the end of his row. He had stepped into the aisle. He was blocking it, though I do not think he meant to. He was just standing there the way young men stand when they do not know what to do with their bodies, hands at his sides, shoulders up near his ears. His face was doing something I had not seen since he was small, a kind of crumpling, like a piece of paper being slowly crushed from the inside. He said, "Mom." I stopped. I looked at him. 24 years old. My only child. Frank's eyes, gray-blue, the color of the lake on an overcast morning. Frank's shoulders. Frank's jaw. The boy who used to crawl into bed with us during thunderstorms until he was 9 because he was afraid of the sound the wind made against the windows on the north side of the house. The boy I taught to tie his shoes on the back step of the garage in the summer of 2007. The boy who fell asleep in the truck, coming home from St. Paul with a foam finger on his hand. The boy who signed his name to a document in a FedEx office in Superior, Wisconsin, declaring that his mother was losing her mind. I said, "Ethan, you signed a paper saying I was confused. You signed your name to it. You sat across from a notary in another state, and you raised your right hand and you swore that I was unstable, that I was making irrational decisions, that I could not be trusted with what your father left me." He said, "Mom, I said, "Go home, Ethan, just not mine." I walked past him. I did not touch him. I did not look back. Patrice was beside me in 2 steps. She linked her arm through mine the way she has done since 1997, since a frozen sidewalk and a bag of kettle corn and a woman crying about a bakery that did not exist yet. We walked out of that courthouse into the April sunshine. The snow was almost gone. There were patches of it left along the curbs and in the shadows between buildings, dirty and gray, the last stubborn remains of a winter that had overstayed its welcome by about 3 months, which is standard for Duluth. The sun was warm on my face. The air smelled like thawing pavement and lake water. I felt nothing. Not victory, not satisfaction, not anger, just a long, slow, deep exhale. The kind that empties you out completely and leaves you standing on the other side of something you were not sure you would survive. Patrice walked me to my car. She hugged me. She said, "I am proud of you." She said, "Call me tonight." She said, "I am making you a crumb cake the size of your head and you are going to eat the whole thing." Then she got in her car and left. I did not go home. I drove straight to the cabin. 2 hours north on Highway 61, through 2 harbors, past the lighthouse, past the ore docks, past the old train bridge, to the gravel road that turns off toward the water. I was still wearing the green anniversary dress. I had not packed a bag. I had not changed my shoes. I drove with the window cracked because the air off Lake Superior in April is the cleanest thing I have ever breathed, and I needed something clean inside me. I unlocked the cabin. I walked through it without stopping. I went out the back door and down the slope to the dock. The old dock. The one Frank had been planning to replace. The cedar planks he had sketched on a legal pad in November with dimensions in the margins and a note that said "Fixed dock with Ethan, summer 25. I sat on that dock until the sun went down. Lake Superior does a thing in the evening that I have never seen any other body of water do. The color shifts. It goes from blue to silver to something between gold and pewter, a color that does not have a name, a color that looks like the lake is deciding what it wants to be before the dark comes. The water moved. A fish jumped somewhere out past the rocks. The wind picked up around 7, and I should have gone inside, but I did not because I was not done sitting yet. I drove home in the dark. I did not turn on the radio. 6 days later, on Monday, April 21st, Donnie Kowalski was served with a 30-day eviction notice from the apartment above the shop. Frank's will, the real one, left that property to me. Frank had let Donnie live there rent-free since 2017 because Frank believed that family was family even when family was Donnie. I am not Frank. I gave Donnie 30 days. Diana drafted the letter. I signed it. I did not write a personal note. 3 weeks later, I drove past the duplex on Ogden Avenue in Superior on my way home from that dentist appointment and saw the U-Haul. You know that part. You were there at the beginning. What I did not tell you at the beginning was why Ethan was in that truck helping Donnie move into a rental duplex in Superior, Wisconsin. The reason was that back in February, while Donnie was busy coaching Ethan on how to file an affidavit against me, he had also asked my son to co-sign on a credit card. Just for the rewards points, bud. Ethan had said yes. Donnie ran that card up to $22,000 by April. The account went to collections in May. Ethan's credit score dropped 140 points in 6 weeks. He could not get a lease. He could not finance a car. He could not rent an apartment without a cosigner. So Donnie's name was on the lease in Superior. Ethan was on the couch. The man who had tried to take everything from me and the boy who had helped him, locked together in a 2-bedroom duplex above a laundromat on Ogden Avenue in Superior, Wisconsin. Neither one able to leave because neither one could pass a credit check. I did not have to do anything to make that happen. They did it to themselves. That summer, I finished what Frank started. I hired Kyle Gunderson to do the work. Kyle brought 2 guys from the shop, young mechanics who were better with their hands than most carpenters I have met, and they drove out to 2 Harbors on a Saturday in July with a flatbed full of cedar planks and a cooler full of sandwiches I had packed at 5 in the morning because I cannot send men to do physical labor without feeding them. It is a character flaw. I have accepted it. The dock went in first. New cedar, same dimensions Frank had sketched on that yellow legal pad in November. Kyle measured twice and cut once, the way Frank taught him, and when the last plank was set and the last screw was driven, Kyle stood on the finished dock and looked out at the lake and did not say anything for about a minute. Then he said, "He would have liked this." I said, "I know, that was the whole conversation. It was enough." The screened porch went up in August, 6-sided bronze screen just like Frank's note. The workbench went in the garage corner in September, custom height, pegboard on the wall. The whole renovation cost $26,200, which was $3,800 more than Frank's original quote because lumber prices had gone up, worth every dollar. I did not negotiate. I did not ask for a discount. I paid Kyle what the work was worth because that is what Frank would have done. I framed Frank's dock sketch and hung it on the wall inside the cabin, next to the kitchen window where the morning light hits it. The pencil lines are fading. The dimensions are still legible. The note in the margin, "Fixed dock with Ethan, summer 25, is still there. Ethan was not there, but the dock is. In August, I did something with the shop that I had been thinking about since April. I kept Kowalski and Sons Auto running under Kyle's management, but I converted the back bay, Bay 2, the bay where Frank died, into the Kowalski Veterans Apprentice Program. Free mechanic training for recently discharged veterans, tools provided. Certification assistance, a small stipend during the training period, funded by the trust. The irony is not lost on me. My son is a veteran. He came home from the Army 8 months before Frank died. He could have been the first person in that program. He could have been standing in his father's shop learning the trade his father built with his own hands. Instead, he was in Superior, Wisconsin, sharing a duplex with the man who had tried to take it all away. I did not design that irony. Life did. Life has a sense of humor I do not always appreciate. In September, I signed the paperwork establishing the Frank Kowalski Memorial Scholarship at the University of Minnesota Duluth. $50,000 from the trust to start. Mechanical engineering. First-generation college students. My husband's name on a piece of paper that will outlast both of us. The first scholarship ceremony was in October. I wore the green anniversary dress. I met the first recipient, a 19-year-old young woman from Ely named Anna Peltier. Her father had died the year before in a logging accident north of Babbitt. He was 47. He was carrying a chainsaw up a slope when his heart gave out, the way working men's hearts sometimes do, without warning and without regard for the plans they had made for the weekend. Anna wanted to be an engineer because her father had been good with his hands and she wanted to be good with hers. She shook my hand. She looked me in the eye. She said, "Mrs. Kowalski, my dad would have been proud to know my education was being paid for in another working man's name. Thank you." I held it together through the presentation. I held it together for the photos. I held it together walking across the parking lot to my car. I made it to the driver's seat. I closed the door. Then I put my head on the steering wheel and I cried for 20 minutes. The kind of crying I had been saving since January. The kind that comes from so deep, it does not make a sound at first. Just shaking, just heat, just everything I had held in place for 9 months, finally finding the crack and pouring through it. That is what I had been saving it for. In November, the school district promoted me. District Administrative Coordinator. Real title. Real authority. A raise of $16,000 a year. I had been quietly running half the administrative functions at Denfeld since 2015. It only took losing my husband and winning a probate case for someone to put it on a business card. The St. Louis County District Attorney's Office interviewed Donnie in late August. 2 prosecutors and an investigator, 3 hours in a conference room. They did not file charges. Diana told me the evidence was strong, but the bar for criminal conviction is higher than for civil dismissal. Donnie's name is now permanently in a public probate record flagged for fraud review. He cannot get bonded. He lost his mechanic certification. He is working part-time at the Napa Auto Parts in Proctor. I am not making that up. At a Kowalski family barbecue in July, one of those big ones at Frank's Uncle Jerry's place on Park Point, Donnie showed up alone. He sat down at a picnic table where 3 of Frank's cousins were eating. Within 2 minutes, all 3 of them, Big Jim, Teresa, and Polly, picked up their plates and walked to another table on the other side of the yard. They did not say a word. They just left him sitting there with his potato salad. Donnie ate by himself for about 10 minutes. Then he got up and left before the horseshoes tournament started. I watched from across the yard. I did not feel triumphant. I felt settled. The way you feel when something that has been crooked for a long time finally falls. Janet Kovich found me in the break room the week after the hearing, coffee in hand. Did not quite look at me. She said she thought she had gotten things wrong. I said yes, she had. She nodded. She walked out. That was the apology. It was enough. Megan and I get coffee every other Sunday now, sometimes at my house, sometimes at a place in Canal Park that does cinnamon rolls the size of a hubcap. She started dating a man named Sam in March of last year. He is a firefighter out of Hermantown. He is calm, kind, has a beard, and has the rare quality of actually listening when a woman is talking instead of waiting for his turn. 6 weeks ago, on a Sunday morning, Sam proposed to Megan on my back porch. I was in the kitchen making pancakes. I looked out the window and saw him on one knee in the grass by my hydrangeas, and Megan had both hands over her mouth, and Benson was barking at a squirrel and missing the moment entirely. I cried into the pancake batter. When they came inside, I acted surprised. I am a terrible actress. They knew. We hugged. Sam called me Mama Lynn, which is a thing he started doing about a year ago and which I did not know I needed until he did it. Ethan has tried to call me 5 times in the last 6 months. The most recent was last Tuesday. I did not pick up. He left a voicemail. I have not listened to it. It is sitting in my phone at the bottom of a list of 4 other voicemails, all unheard. I do not know if I will listen. Maybe one day. Probably one day. I am a mother, and I know what mothers do in the end. But not today. Today, I do not owe him my voice. Last Saturday evening, I was out at the cabin. It has become a small ritual. Every other Friday, I leave Duluth after work, drive 2 hours north on Highway 61 with the windows down if the weather allows, and I do nothing for 48 hours. I read paperbacks from the library book sale in 2 Harbors. I cook simple food, eggs in the morning, a sandwich at lunch, a steak from the Food City if I am feeling fancy, which I usually am, because a woman who survived what I survived can eat a steak on a Saturday night without justifying it to anyone. Sometimes Patrice comes. She brings lefse and a bottle of something, and we sit on the screened porch and talk about nothing until the mosquitoes drive us inside. Sometimes we do not talk at all. That is the mark of a 30-year friendship. You can sit in a room with someone and say nothing, and it does not feel empty. It feels like every conversation you have ever had is stacked up like cordwood, warming the place from the inside. Diana came once. She brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my steak. She told me about a case from 1993, a woman in Virginia who fought her own family 7 years over a hardware store and won. She said, "I have been an attorney for 35 years, Lindy. Your case is the one I am going to remember." I poured her more wine. That seemed sufficient. I sleep better at the cabin than I have in 20 years. I think it is the quiet. Silence on Lake Superior is not empty silence. It is full silence. The water moves, the trees move. The wind comes through the screens and it sounds like the earth breathing. I think it is also that Frank is in every board on that dock, every plank Kyle set with Frank's dimensions in his hand. Every screw driven into cedar that Frank picked out in a sketch at his desk in November while I was making dinner in the next room. He was going to build it with his son and surprise me. He was going to say, "Look what we did, Lynn. I know this because I knew him." Last Saturday, the sun going down behind the ridge. The lake had gone that color it gets in late spring, somewhere between gold and pewter, a color that does not have a name but that I think of as the color of things ending and beginning at the same time. I was sitting on the new dock in a folding chair with a cup holder that Frank would have called unnecessary and then used every time. My coffee had gone cold. I did not care. A loon landed about 30 feet from me on a rock just past where the dock ends. It stood there. It looked at the lake. I looked at the lake. We stayed like that for a long time. Frank is not here. He is not coming back. I know that the way you know your own name, he is gone. But everything he ever loved about this piece of water, every board he sketched on a legal pad, every quiet morning he talked about retiring out here with me, every plan he made for showing his son how to fix a dock, every bolt he ever turned in that shop, every tool he bought one at a time and put in a red chest with his name on the lid, every bit of that is still here. And so am I. That is the part nobody could take from me. They tried. They came with a cut video and a manipulated boy and a loud attorney with a pinky ring. They filed papers and signed affidavits and said the word family until it stopped meaning anything. They did not get it. They did not come close, because what they were trying to take was never just money or a name on a deed. It was 23 years of a life I built with a man who loved me. You cannot put that in a filing. You cannot cut it at timestamp 47. You cannot take it to a FedEx office and swear it away. It is mine. It was always mine. I am 46 years old. I run a school district office. I own a paid-off house, a lake cabin my husband designed, and a trust nobody can touch. I have a best friend who hides my phone in frozen lefse when I need her to. I have a girl I think of as a daughter, and a man named Sam who calls me Mama Lynn. I have a scholarship with my husband's name on it. I have a loon that visits on Saturday evenings. I have a quiet life. I built it on top of the worst year of my life. And every morning I know exactly how I got here, and exactly what it cost me, and exactly who I am. God is good. Not always the way we ask, not always on our schedule. But he put Patrice on a frozen sidewalk in 1997. He put Diana in an office on Superior Street. He put Megan in a parking lot with the truth. And he put Frank's voice on a recording saying the one sentence that needed to be said, "I do not understand all of it, but I trust the hand that arranged it, and I am grateful. Lord knows I am grateful." So tell me, if your own son had signed his name to a paper saying you were losing your mind, would you pick up the phone? Would you let him back in? Or would you let it ring? I want to know. Tell me in the comments. An ore boat passed while I sat on that dock, far out, heading north toward Thunder Bay. Its lights were on. It moved across the water like a cathedral on a dark sea. The loon watched it, so did I. Then the loon called out, that long, trembling sound they make at dusk on Superior, the sound that people who have never heard it cannot imagine, and people who have heard it never forget. It echoed off the water and the rocks and the ridge, and then it stopped, and the lake was quiet. I finished my cold coffee, I folded my chair, I walked up to the cabin and turned on the porch light, because someone once told me to leave it on. And I have. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I know it was heavy, and I know you stayed to the end. That means more than I can say. There is another story waiting for you on your screen. Click it. I will see you over there.